Full disclaimers, like I said, I'm not Matt. I'm not going to be as entertaining. My apologies up front. Secondly, this is my happy face. So if I look mad, I'm not mad. I'm just, my wife hates the beard. It makes me look 10 years older, and she says I look angry all the time. And then lastly, I'm a Marine. So if I tend to come across as aggressive, it's just because that's the way they train me. And so those are the disclaimers up front. But at the end of the day, that's actually part of my story, right? So what is my story? And believe it or not, it's kind of nice to have Katie. Good to see you. It's nice to have people here that have the history of this, because she was the one that was the mentor for me when I ended up taking on the role as a fleet project team officer to work with the contractors that were there to transform Marine Corps aviation when Marine Corps aviation didn't want to be transformed. So it was a fight, and that was the first time that I had started to figure out that one of the hardest things to change is culture. Plain and simple. I think you were the first one that told me that. The hardest thing to change is culture. So before you can affect any significant change, we'll talk a little bit about what that means in terms of leadership, management, and execution in a few minutes. You have to really kind of take a hard look at the culture. And one of the things that we learned is that there's phases to this thing. So again, superpower that we talked about, I get up when I'm knocked down. I get knocked down a lot. I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but my advantage has always been that I could generally recognize trends first. I could generally assemble a site picture before most of my peers, and then I always am bold enough to take first mover advantage. So that's what I do. I take first mover advantage. Now, I already told you I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the most capable guy in the room, but I'll take the door. I'll bust the door down with the full expectation that more capable people that are able to pull these things off will come in behind me and make greatness happen. And so Katie was one of those people. She couldn't break the doors down because she wasn't a uniform, but she had the answers. So I actually had to push against the culture and was bold enough to do that. And then it took a couple years, but we rooted it. And it eventually became a standard for Marine Corps aviation writ large. So that's where I started to figure out, okay, that's my value proposition. That's what I'm half good at. So as we started to move down, the path, like I said, I started the company. I knew what Matt was doing, and I'll just kind of bridge quickly to one of the near-term examples of how I was able to use this. So I would say it's been about 4 years, Matt. When did we do that last work? With about 4 years, right? So if you can imagine convening where it is right now, go back 4 years. Now I'm in business, right? I already had a chance to sell my first company. I was now a senior director for an aerospace company, and I was a senior director for training and education. So we had an international customer that came to us. They were going to buy a new kind of unmanned systems technology, and they needed to train their people on that capability. So it was an international customer, not English first speakers, and it was a significant challenge. So I knew what Matt was doing. So I was like, okay. I started to think like a business guy, and I was like, all right, I'm going to come up with a series of things to pull together a package to sell to this company and to deliver the goods. The platform to deliver the goods was Convene. So at the end of the day, I just looked at it like a tool in a toolbox. Let me see if I can get through some slides here. Did I hit the right button? I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go to this slide here first. All right. So bottom line is I'm in business. I've got a bunch of folks on my team, and I have to build a very specific capability, but I have to be able to deliver it, an asynchronous curriculum to an international customer, and I have to be able to set up dialogue with that international customer, because I know that they're not going to consume the information right off the bat. They have to slowly consume the information that we put together. They have to have a chance to review it, to think about it, and then they need to be able to communicate back and forth with the company to do that. So the first thing that popped in my mind was, Matt's got a platform to do that. Remember, this is 4 years ago. So then what I did is I went in and I assembled a team of subject matter experts. So I brought in a bunch of UAS pilots, several engineers, several test pilots. I brought in some curriculum developers. I even pulled in Matt as a consultant. And then we harnessed the Convene team to be able to pull this thing together. So the first point I'd like to make here is you have to think about, in terms of how I view this, you have to think about Convene as a tool in the toolbox, right? It is something to be used to deliver impact. And that's exactly how I viewed it. The second thing is that the applications in Convene, I knew, were not tied to a single formulaic approach. I had the ability to define how I needed to use that particular platform to deliver the goods. So it was kind of a patchwork of things. So I pulled that thing together. We started to execute, and without getting into too many details, it was easily a 7-figure contract. So I used Convene 4 years ago to generate 7 figures for this particular company, 4 years ago. And I'll tell you right now that this platform is exponentially better than it was 4 years ago. So applications for Convene, not limited to one's imagination. Convene enables this asynchronous project management across multiple organizations. So one of the things that we had to wrestle with was program management. So I turned to Matt, and I was like, Matt, we have to keep these people informed about how we're evolving this thing. I got people all over the country that are supporting this. How do I do program management? I talked to Matt. Matt turned to his team. I actually threw some resources across his way to help to drive this, and they built for that particular application what you guys now see under the program management capabilities of Convene. He was instantaneously reactive. So it enabled me to manage the team across multiple sites and even deliver content across different countries, right? We had multiple team members that were not only content developers, but program managers, subject matter expertise that I brought in to deliver this content, and we used the Convene platform to communicate. And then lastly, it provided a centralized means for me to take care and manage all of those things, whether it was PowerPoint briefs or questions or whatever it may be. There's a term that Katie will use that I'm going to butcher, but it's concurrency management, which is essentially taking care of all of the things to make sure they're all aligned. There's a million ways to do that, but when you centralize everything that Convene has done, it's a one-stop shop. I was able to manage all that stuff, and everyone could see what I was doing the whole time. And then bottom line is I didn't have to worry about IT infrastructure because I was paying Matt and his team to do it. So for the price of a license, I tapped into Matt with Convene, and like I said, it was a 7+ figure contract in support of a first customer 4 years ago.
I didn't make 7 figures.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, what I think Matt brought me here to do certainly wasn't because of the entertainment value, as you've already seen, but it was because I think he wanted me to convey the fact that if you think about this in terms of a platform that can deliver whatever your desire is, whether that's a profit-based desire or non-profit-based or just impacting lives, it's there. The limits are largely here. Whatever you could come up with. You don't have to use everything that he's got. You can use only a part of it, or you can use it all. But it's really up to you as the, I'll just call them business owners, right, to be able to drive that home. So any questions before I kind of move off into a couple other things on that? It was a very effective thing. I ended up leaving the company, started my second company, and shortly after that. So I think that contract was sustained for at least a couple of years, right? So it's there for the taking. So I'll just challenge you all. Everyone in here is a subject matter expert. You know what you can sell. I viewed it as a tool in the toolbox, which is a slightly different model than me trying to sell content from me. I just used it as a resource, and it was a very effective resource. Okay, with that, you want me to get into a little bit of leadership training, or do you want me to, what do you want me to do? Okay. Okay, so.
Real quick. This is what we are in this room. Let me set this stage. What we are in this room, I want to thank you all for being here, right? But what we are in this room is a small room. Where we are today, and you're going to hear this the rest of the day, where we are today is not where we're going to be in 1 year from now. It's not where we're going to be 2 years from now. It's not where we're going to be in 3 years from now. but you are my leaders. You are my leaders. And you are going to help this platform go and take off through what you guys are doing. And so he's an expert on leadership. He does leadership training. It's just wonderful, the people that go to him. So I wanted him to talk to you guys a little bit about leadership from a high level down.
Okay, so now that you have the backdrop of what I did with that particular contract, you can kind of understand, this will kind of fill in the gaps about how I pulled this off, right? So I use this a lot. In fact, I just used this, where I'm working right now, even earlier this week. It's an effective tool, but like all Marines, I like pictures. So can't get too complex, you'll lose me. But one of the things that I've learned over the years that we always have to think about, and this really applies to either an enterprise or if you're a one-person company doing great things, you have to think about all three levels of an organization. So organizational, I describe those as organizational elements. There's other descriptions out there, but I try to keep things simple so that even a Marine can understand it, right? So I break that down into the leadership element, the management element, and the execution element. Now, the reason I use the picture of an iceberg is because it'll allow me to convey a couple of ideas to you here in a second about how to actually take advantage of that way of thinking. So a lot of times people will look at leadership in a company or in an organization, and they're the ones that get all the sunlight, right? You're the ones that are in front. Everyone is kind of oriented towards those people as the senior decision makers, as the people that are kind of the face of the organization, and they're generally responsible for vision, strategy, and overall decision making. But the big takeaway for this slide is the volume of activity that generally occurs in any organization happens below the waterline. Does that make sense? So typically, most of the volume occurs either at the management element or the execution element. Management element, which is a lot of people don't understand the difference between leadership and management. Leadership, responsible for vision and strategy. Management, they're the ones that actually apply and work resources, right? So they're the ones that are translating vision and strategy into action plans and then moving those down to the execution element, which is the production level of any organization or effort, right? So as you can see there, it's pretty easy when you look at that graphic to kind of correlate the fact that most of that is done below the waterline. So I'm going to reiterate, even if you're a single person organization, you still have to think about all three things. You have to come up with the vision and strategy, but then you have to kind of break yourself apart. You have to think about what you need to do as a manager to appropriately utilize and manage resources, and then ultimately you have to execute. But you can't neglect any one of those levels or you'll miss something. Yeah, that's a great question. Did everybody hear that question? What was the shift between going from a single person company to a leader of a company? It was really more out of necessity. Like at the end of the day, I recognized that I was dropping some things, and by trying to do everything in a micromanagement sort of way, I was failing. I couldn't do it. There was not enough me there to do it. So I had to start thinking about things differently. And then the other thing is you have to understand my personality, right? I'm not a front man like Matt is. I'm pretty stern. I'm a Mustang, so I was an enlisted guy before I became an officer. They always gave me the hardest jobs because I was the guy that could take on the task. Everywhere I've gone, I've been the straight man, for lack of a better description. You know, the guy that has to hold the standards that's against everybody else's wishes, right? So I've kind of run that way. You can't do that in business either, right? So if you're trying to compel people to come buy your products or do some things, I was kind of functioning at a managerial level, and that was also a fail. I needed to change the way that I did business. I had to elevate myself to the leader and the vision guy. And then I had to acknowledge that for me to do this, and I kind of started learning this when you came around, Katie, which was, you know, Marines are really good at martial organizations. We're very good at organizing and skill sets and all that stuff. But no one taught us that. I didn't go to Harvard. I started the company right out of active duty, right? So, and then now I've had the chance to do this for a few years. You have to execute all three levels of activities, bottom line, or you're going to miss something. So it's, I don't know if that answers your questions necessarily, but I did. And I had to acknowledge that. And I had to give myself permission to do that. Because remember, based on my story, I was always below the waterline. And I was comfortable there. You can't run a business that way. I'll give you one example. My lead business developer for my first company. She was very, very good at what she did. Very plugged in. But long story short, we're in a very tough business, right? So to try to convince people that you're good enough to do strategic consulting for billion-dollar companies and billion-dollar contracts, you got to sell yourself, right? So I hired her on. This was one of my first mistakes, right from early mistakes. I hired her on. I was like, I'm going to give you any resource that you need to do your job. Go out and chase the work that you think you can win. And I thought that was a good decision. So I was like, go forth and go conquer. If you want to build business in training or counseling or something else, go do it, right? So really excited. I gave her the keys to the kingdom. I gave her a team to go chase work. After about 1.5 years, we had won zero. Now my company was in a pickle. I had just paid a whole lot of money to keep a bunch of people on overhead for about 1 year with no revenue. So I basically had to go, all right, I guess I better go gin up some work. So I went and ginned up some work, and we were able to keep the company moving. But she came back later to me and was like, tell me, what's our vision? What's our strategy? And I was like, well, whatever you think it is. That doesn't work. You can't just let this thing go. You got to drive it. So long story short, I was able to generate enough contracts to keep things going. But that was my first wake-up call that they don't need me to be, I don't need to be passive. They don't need me to be passive. I certainly don't need to be micromanaging their stuff, but I owe them a vision and a strategy for what we're going to do. So that was one of my first real world lessons on that.
All right. So everybody needs a mentor. Kate, you got a mentor? Sitting right next to her. Right? Everybody needs a mentor. And I'm lucky enough to really have two of my mentors in the room, Katie and Vince. They really helped me understand business and life. Katie helped me take the story of Clark Beatty really and turn it in. I taught all the career resource management classes for her. I taught all the instructor training classes for her. I spent hours. How many hours we spent together, Katie? Hours creating briefs, creating classes, training Marines and all that. Vince is he's one of my best friends in the world. I'm not at his level, right? So you got to sometimes ramp up. Find yourself a mentor, okay? I eat red crayons. I don't color with them, I eat them, okay? That's what Marines do, you know? So you got to ramp up. So I really appreciate you being here. I come in with I'll cover this real quick so we can move on. Vince looked at me one time. Y'all know me. Y'all come to me. I'm going to give you a hug. I'm the touchy-feely. I'm the passionate guy. I'm here. We're going to do it. We got this. I'm the cheerleader. I love it. I got Vince and I got Eugene. They're going to drop the hammer on you. Okay? They're going to drop the hammer because that's not me. But Vince said to me one day, he said, is this a business, Matt, or is this a hobby? Jason Berry said that to me as a business coach for me. Is it a business or is it a hobby? I love the impact that we make. I love changing lives. I love taking stories and taking the things that y'all are passionate about and changing the lives. We're going to talk. I'm going to give Nicole all the credit in the world, and we're going to talk about this later. Convene Communities, a platform with a purpose. She gifted me that. And we're going to talk about that in the last section because I truly think this is what it is. But he said to me, both of them said, is this a business or is it a hobby? And then I ask people, I say, what are you here for? Are you here for passion? Are you here for profit? Why can't you do both? Why can't you do both? And it's okay if you're here for a passion. That's okay. It's okay if you're here just to make a profit. But it's also okay to take your story and do both, right? So thank you. Appreciate it. Let's take 5 minutes and then we'll be back with the Eugene Brown.